Osei-Frimpong. I come to you live every Monday and Thursday. Monday, I do a relationship show, trying not to get you divorced and help your relationship with your kids and help your kids with their relationship with you. And on Thursday, I do a more politics-focused show. Today, I'm going to talk about being an educated lame. A few weeks ago, someone mentioned that I am an educated lame, and to which I thought about the designation, and I thought, that sounds about right. And that might not be the worst thing to do. First of all, my life is dope. My family's cool. I love I got 3 kids, and I put a lot into them. And I feel like it's really worthwhile because, well, this is America, so nobody else is going to put in, black people, if you're a parent, like nobody else is going to put in your kids what you can. So go ahead and do. So that's one reason why I think it's okay to be an educated lame. Second thing is, I was talking to one of my profs a few years ago, just talking to guy's an Orthodox Jew, and he was like, well, the problem with black people is you just don't value education. And we talked about that. I was like, oh, that's not true. Actually, black parents spend more time with their kids on education. They value education. It's just that, they're coming from deficits in other ways that it makes it the case that it doesn't appear like we do. In the same way, you can say, like, well, the problem is black people don't value family. Well, it turns out that black people value family, but it comes from other cultural, material and cultural deficits that end with higher divorce rates and other issues. But it's not because we don't value family or we don't value education. There are just a lot of external determinants that kind of move through the culture. And, our families were targeted and our schools were targeted. You remember the civil rights movement, depending on who you talk to, began with the bombing. Those black girls at church. So you have to think about how we were targeted, so we talked about that a little bit, and he was like, yeah. But then I remember this is the same professor who, before in a previous conversation, he was lamenting about his own kids and about how one of them didn't finish his education. And I was like, oh, that's too bad. It would be sad if one of my kids didn't finish education and dropped out or something like that. And to which I went a little bit deeper in the conversation because we were going for about 15 minutes. And it turns out of his 3 kids, only 2 of them have PhDs. And the third one, the one who didn't finish his education, I think they're both PhDs in philosophy. Of the third one, the one who didn't finish his education, he's ABD. But dissertation, so when he says didn't finish his education and really like kind of lamented about that, like, my one son didn't ever finish his education. He meant didn't finish his PhD, to which I think, well, if that's what you think about education, then yeah, I guess there's a claim to be made that maybe we don't we don't value education because, I've been enough black graduations where, a guy graduates and everybody in his family graduates high school and everyone in his family has like a T-shirt with his face on it, right? So if not finishing your education means not attaining your PhD, then we have problems finishing our education. So I just thought about that as like a different standard of what it takes to be educated in a different culture. Now, like, this guy's an Orthodox Jew, but Orthodox Jews come in all sorts of stripes. So, you go to New York, you'll find Orthodox Jews who can't do anything because they spend all of their time studying the Torah. And so they don't know how to do basic things like chemistry or anything. It's all, just Torah. So Orthodox Judaism can look like a lot of things, but one of it looks like, when I say value education, it's just presumed that you're going to get a PhD. And if you don't do that, then you have not, for some reason, something went wrong in your life, and you haven't fulfilled your education. You haven't finished your education. So I thought that was kind of an amusing take on what it meant to be educated, and also I don't think he would ever consider, like, the phrase "educated lame" wouldn't ever come out of his mouth. So you got to figure out, like, how does that become a thing in our community? And I'm not one of those guys who's ever thought that acting smart is acting white. I've just known too many smart black people and too many dumb white people. Not too hard to figure out that acting white is not bright. The whites are not particularly bright. All right, so, or competent. So that's one thing about being an educated lame that like might actually make us rethink about the moral designation of that appellation. So another thing I wanted to talk about was something I read about James Baldwin. And it turns out James Baldwin early in his life said like, look, man, I'm so ugly that I had to refine my voice into such an instrument of dignity and communication because it was all I got. I'm, short black gay man, and all I have is my mouth. And so I thought that was a very telling witticism of Baldwin. I just wanted a life where I didn't have to kiss anybody's white ass, just for the sake of to secure my check. I didn't have to like worry about like making white people feel comfortable. And that was, I think it's an important part of black life. I wanted to see what actually freedom looked like. And you can't do that if you're always worried about jeopardizing a white check or white chick, depending on the scene you're running in. So I wanted a life where I never had to worry about jeopardizing jeopardizing what I saw as my truth to accommodate white feelings. And so, I don't know. You could say I'm less ambitious than I should be, but I don't know. And I also wanted a life where I wanted to make sure that I raised my kids myself because I knew those are people who had to listen to me. Because other people, you have to kind of like talk them into listening to you, or they have like everybody else in America. I'm a black man who is smart enough but not brilliant. So pretty much a lot of people just get paid in their life to ignore me. Like there's just too much money on the other side of recognizing this truth, especially, my last videos on anti-Semitism and the last video on my qualified cultural misogyny. There are just too many, there's too many incentives just to pretend I'm not speaking the truth. And by the way, if you think I'm speaking the truth, especially if you're Jewish and especially if you're a woman, you need to kick down because I've lost a lot of Jews and a lot of women. So the extra Jews and women who are watching this and appreciating the quality of my wisdom need to go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, and $50 a month to make up for your brethren who got a little bit scared. Because, I still have bills to pay and soccer camps to afford for my kids and all of that stuff. And and then black people, I want to say thank you for kicking in, and I will keep doing what I'm doing for you because I want strong black communities, and I think strong black communities include families, and I want to get that divorce rate down, get that marriage rate up, and once you're there, I want you to know what you're doing, so this is why I tell you what I'm doing with my kids, because I think I'm doing with my kids probably better than most, definitely better than I was, which is a goal. Which I think is a goal. Also, in defense of being an educated lame, and honestly, if you're looking at people and who to partner with and maybe why you should partner with an educated lame, is there's a way in which if you're not educated, it doesn't really matter how much financial literacy you know, it is really expensive being a screw-up. Right, so it doesn't matter how educated you are, if you are screwed up in some of the more human issues, and I'm not screwed up in some of the more human issues because I've actually studied the humanities, but if you're not, it's very expensive. So if you're not very educated in the human issues and you find yourself, with a drug habit, rehabs are expensive. If you're not very educated and you find yourself like having bad dietary or health priorities, all of that stuff, trainers and just being like fat and gross, like that's expensive. All of that stuff is expensive. So just thinking about being a powerful person who brings a lot of money to the table, you have to bring a lot of money to the table if you don't have a quality of culture that I think comes through a proper education, or at least watching quite a few and listening to quite a few of my videos. I think that quality of education you'll get through quite a few of my videos will save you. Depending on how much money you make, it might save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. If I've saved you a divorce, and let's be honest, if you've watched all my videos, I might have saved you a divorce, then that's a big chunk of change that has been saved thanks to the quality of my mind. And once again, you should go to www.funkyacademic.com to kick in $5, $15, or $50 so that I can put more money back into my community as opposed to like let it go out to divorce lawyers. And probably most of the money you get will either go to the show or go to my kids, and those are both good. Those are good places for your money. Your money will be well stewarded if you go to www.funkyacademic.com. I was thinking, just when I was preparing the show, I was thinking it probably takes, if all you bring to the table is money and you just have crass or poor habits about parenting, relationships, and everything else, then it probably takes about $500K a year to attain the quality of life and peace of mind of someone who, like, let's say your total household income is 80 to 1,000, 80 to 100K a year. If you just have 150K, but you have bad habits of parenting and bad habits of relationships and bad sensibilities about these kinds of things, and all you think is about money, and you've made it to 150K isn't enough, because your screw-ups are going to cost money. Like, you're going to have to send your kid to very expensive schools because you are expecting schools to raise your kids. And then when that screws up, you're going to have to pay for even more like extra special therapy and counseling, because it turns out the very expensive school didn't do what you wanted it to do for your kid, because your kid's still kind of a screw-up. And all of this could have been managed better if you just sent them to the regular public school, but had been like a very good parent in terms of the quality of advice you gave them. But because you didn't want to give advice, you just wanted to make money, or you didn't know enough because you just weren't appropriately educated, you were too busy being a baller, then it ends up costing you money. You read about someone like Tina Turner's family. Tina Turner's like, I gave them everything. Tina Turner, I gave them everything. I gave my boys everything. And all of her kids are like really, really bad. Really, really bad news. And that's not Ike. That's Tina, but both Tina and Ike. That's both Tina and Ike just not knowing what they were doing and thinking that money solves problems. A lot of rich people, especially, and there aren't a lot of rich black people in general, but a lot of rich black people get this wrong anyway, because they spent so much time struggling, and they're the first generation who makes it. You talk to a bunch of black boomers who aren't very impressed with their kids, and it turns out that it was because they weren't the greatest. They didn't know enough. They simply didn't know enough, because they thought, because they grew up poor, they thought money would solve all their problems, and now they have money, but then they got divorced. So they made all this money, but now their kid doesn't have a father. Yeah, that's not great. That's not going to end well. So you got a lot of black parents who, screwed this up because they thought it was a money game. They thought life was a money game. Like, you could be a big baller. You could be a business owner. You could own properties, all that stuff. But it turns out that none of that is going to be a substitute for actually parenting your kids well. And at the end of the day, look, you people working big jobs and earn a lot of money, in 20 years, nobody's going to care about what you did at your job except your kids. And do you want them to care about what you did at your job because that job is what took time away from them? Do you want them to care about what you did at their job because that's the way you earn money, and they really just care about the money, right? So in defense of being an educated lame, if the education is what helps you make better decisions with respect to the more important relationships of your life, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I don't want to be a baller who's with a divorce and I only see my kids 3 days a week. There's no way I could tell myself that I'm not losing everything. Like, I couldn't do that. Plus, my kind of parenting doesn't work 3 days a week. I'm with my kids every day. I'm with my kids in the morning. Like, we wake up every morning before school and do work, right? And the quality of work that I've gone through in other videos, but like and then, I pick my kids up early from school and we do work, just because I don't trust any of these schools. I don't trust any schools, white schools, black schools. No public education is going to teach my kids, especially like my kids are black, but also my kids, what they need to learn. So like I put the time in and do work with them. And so I guess I'm creating educated lames possibly, but I think that's appropriate. They already have more skills at a deeper level than I did when I was probably twice their age, which I think is important, which is what a legacy should, which is like what you're trying to do with your kids. And if you think that just comes down to money, then I think you're screwing up the culture part of what it is to be a human. What it is to be a human. Doesn't matter how much. If you give me $500,000, give me $1 million, and I have screwed up kids, I'm going to spend that $1 million trying to unscrew up my kids. Like there's nothing. And I think this might have been the theme of secession. Like all the money in the world couldn't make up for the fact that all of those kids were screw ups, were like fundamentally unserious, incompetent humans at being human. Right? So it takes a quality of cultural both insight and then transmission. And this doesn't come naturally just by meditating on it. You need to actually read and study and become educated and then transmit that education, which is a different kind of skill and a disposition, which people think, especially people who don't have money or don't have kids, think that it just happens with money. And a lot of things become easier with money, but after a certain amount of money, after about 80,000, 100,000, if you are uneducated culturally, it's going to take a lot of money to make up for that. Like you need to jump up to $250,000 because $150,000 is not enough to raise kids if you don't know what you're doing. And you think institutions, you're going to pay the wrong people to try to raise your kids, and then those wrong people who are incentivized to take your money are just going to take your money, your tutors, your coaches, your private schools. They're going to take your money, and your kids are still going to be screw-ups, or fundamentally, like, if not screw-ups, boring and uninteresting people. I don't want to ever be disappointed in talking to my kids that they're shallow. So like that comes from imputing wisdom into them or putting them in institutions that will. But that means you need the discretion to know which institutions will and then which institutions just kind of say they will. And especially, once again, I think the stakes are higher if you're black because, everything's just a little bit more fragile. So if you're going to be a big baller and you're just going to go for money and you think that's going to be your lead, then it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take $500,000 a year to raise three or four kids. But if you understand that it's money's the enabling condition, not the solve itself, and you just need enough to then allow you to realize your own wisdom. One, you need to become wise, but you only need 80 to 120 to raise 3 or 4 kids. All right, so I hope this has been helpful. Go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com. Kick in $5, $15, or $50 for me to help raise my kids. If you you do not want to try to pay your way out of being uneducated. The best bit of financial literacy is having the discretion not to pick a gold digger. like that quality of financial literacy that comes from a humanities education, that comes from actually trying not to keep people based on your income, right? So that quality of financial education will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of your life. Not having kids by a gold digger, because then you're not going to have to. Because gold diggers are also bad parents, right? So you're going to have to pay to get your kids deprogrammed from your gold digger spouse, and then your gold digger will take half of your spouse. So the idea that financial literacy is just about stocks and 401ks and investments and is ridiculous when the most debilitating, both culturally and materially and psychically debilitating thing that could happen has to do with your judgment about partners and how you think about what's important in life with respect to your relationships, both with your intimate partner and your kids. Right? And if you use money to solve that, there are just too many agencies who exist to try to take your money and pretend to solve your problem. Like all these therapists, no amount of, you can't send your kid to therapist. You can't send your kids to therapist if you're a bad parent and expect that to change your save your bad parenting. Like the therapists are there to take your money. You can't, if you're a bad parent, you can't just send your kid to school and expect that school to teach your black kid. First of all, especially if your kid is black. No, like you need to do the job. And you need to at least be educated enough to know when the institution's not doing the job. So, hope this has been helpful in defense of an educated lame. And, if you want one thesis from this show, it's that it's very, very, very expensive to be a happy baller. It's possible, but if you want money to solve all your problems, you need to bring a lot of money, especially if you're black. And it needs to be steady, because you're expecting money to raise your kid. You're expecting money to keep your lifestyle and your spouse, who's probably a gold digger. You're expecting, so to keep all of them happy, it's going to take a lot of money, which is possible. Or you can, be happy being an educated lame, not lead with the money, and things are a lot cheaper. You got to kind of DIY stuff. It's got to be you with the kid working it out, but it's going to be the most fulfilling work alive. Because look, nobody listens to me like my kids do. Nobody listens to me like my immediate family does. And maybe you people. But if you think more people should listen to me, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, $50 a month. It'll help broaden the reach of the show and all of that. And so the most important work I can do is going to be with my family and with you. Even the students I teach, they are shot through with incentives to ignore me, because, the schools are trying to produce good capitalists in a way that I feel like is unbecoming, and the schools are indifferent to whether the kids get divorced in 5-10 years. Actually, a lot of these schools are just preparing young women to divorce their husbands. That's pretty much, they're just the little gold digger factories and preparing women to divorce their husbands. But maybe that's a fodder for a different show. Anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate what you're doing for me, and go over to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in what you can kick in. I give the show for free. There's no special content for people who pay, because I actually think that distribution's more important than my little nut. But everything costs. So do your part, and I will see you Thursday talking about something completely different. Take care.